This week on Political Capital, President Obama unveils his latest jobs plan with a price tag of $447 billion. Will it pass? We ask Republican Senator and Gang of Six member Mike Crapo. And in the last word, Republican presidential candidates square off with frontrunner Rick Perry channeling Charles Ponzi on Social Security. We begin the show with Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho, who joins us here in the studio. Thank you for being with us today, Senator.
Thank you, Al. It's good to be with you.
Let me start off by asking you about the President's Thursday night address to Congress, his jobs initiative. Your impression, did he do well? Did he make sense?
Well, I think he gave an incredibly powerful speech, but frankly, I was discouraged by it for a number of reasons. It continues to look at temporary solutions that are very expensive, continues to try to spend our way into a prosperous economy. And frankly, on a number of other fronts, the president seemed to be very resistant to the kind of fundamental economic and fiscal reforms that I think are the kinds of things that we should be pursuing.
What was he resistant to, for instance?
Well, I interpreted his remarks about regulatory reform to be pretty much, no, we're not going to do it. We've got a little bit going on, but that's about it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we face right now with uncertainty in the economy and in the business world.
How about the payroll tax proposals he made last night, both for small business and for employees? Should they be enacted, extended for a year?
You know, the payroll taxes are something that I've supported in the past, and I think that they could be extended, as the president has proposed.
And increased.
And increased. Actually, he's extending it to the employees as well as the employers. And I don't disagree with that because I do believe that that's something that can be helpful in the small business arena and frankly with individuals as they deal with incredible troubles right now. I don't believe it's the kind of fundamental reform of our tax code and our economic policy that we really need to begin aggressively pursuing.
And how about short term? Is it desirable or not, the aid to states to prevent layoff of teachers and the stuff for veterans?
Well, it's a good idea, except that it's so expensive. And what we have seen is that over the last, well, since the president took office, we've added $4 trillion to our national debt, and we've lost 1.7 million jobs, trying to spend our way into it with the government support of this kind. And we've got to ultimately realize that we really, truly need a paradigm shift in our fiscal policy. And what the president's proposals last night were, for the most part, amounted to adding about $450 billion of new spending over the next couple of years, and then trying to offset it over 10 years by stalling the effort we have to reduce the deficit.
Now, the president said it would all be paid for under his proposal, but he would insist that the super committee and then Congress pay for this additional $447 billion. Is that a pipe dream?
Well, it's a pipe dream, and it's also a discouragement for this reason. It's a pipe dream in the sense that he's proposing to do the pay-fors over 10 years, but the spending is happening over 2, and we need to remember that. But even more so, the way he said he wanted to do it was that he said he wanted to just add this on top of what the joint committee that's now working on the debt crisis solution is working on. And the reason that's discouraging is because he appears to be saying that if we meet the minimum target of about $2 to $2.5 trillion of the debt ceiling debate conclusion, then we can start spending again. But the problem is that was a very minimal solution dealing with the extension of the debt ceiling. We need to be hitting about $4 to $5 trillion of deficit reduction
over 10 years,
before we can really just keep our head above water and start developing those fundamental reforms that I talked about earlier.
What are the odds that the super committee is going to come up with something?
Well, you know, I've been asked that question many times, and I don't have a good answer. I pretty much say, if you look at the traditional politics in America, which are still in play, it's hard to see how the committee gets somewhere because we've had so many efforts at it in so many different contexts.
But you succeeded in the Gang of Six.
That's what I was just about to say. There are the reasons to succeed are so powerful and so compelling and so imminent right now in terms of the impact in our economy that I believe that this committee truly not only has an opportunity, but has the capacity to do something big. And there will be a lot of us who will be advocating that and helping to build the pathway for this committee to be a success.
But, Senator, you also were on the Bowles-Simpson Commission and looking at both of that, the Bowles-Simpson and at the Gang of Six. The one thing that happened is that there were sufficient numbers of people from the Democrats, the left, if you will, who gave on entitlements against the base of the party, and there were sufficient number of Republicans like you who, however distasteful, gave on higher revenues. revenues against the base of the party. You got to do both to get something done, don't you?
You really do, but I want to clarify that because on entitlement reform, that's straightforward. We need to get in and do the kind of fundamental reform that will help us to change the spending lines. On tax policy or revenue policy, it gets a little bit complicated because we truly can generate more revenue to the federal government by the kind of basic tax reform that the Commission and the Gang of Six proposed. And we can actually achieve that in a revenue neutral way at the outset, but grow the economy.
But both Bowles-Simpson and the Gang of Six would result in net revenue increases. And they're very clear that we're going to have to increase taxes some. Tax reform, too, and that may produce more revenue down the road, but we're also going to have to increase taxes.
Bowles-Simpson did. The Gang of Six had proposed that we utilize dynamic scoring as we create the revenue, the rate reductions. And I personally think that it could have been achieved that the revenue would have been higher and the tax rates could have been maintained.
But here's what Barack Obama says. Hey, I've given on entitlements. He said last night, I'm willing to cut the spending on Medicare. Democratic base doesn't like that. And then he says not a single Republican leader in Congress or a single Republican presidential candidate is willing to do the same thing on the other side of the equation.
But he always brings it back to making the wealthy pay their fair share and saying that his proposal is raising taxes. And again, whether it's the Gang of Six or the Bowles-Simpson Commission, they did not raise taxes. They reduced the tax rates, and in the Bowles-Simpson case, they didn't reduce them in an entirely equal amount to the reduction of the tax expenditures. In the Gang of Six process, we were adjusting that to try to achieve the utilization of dynamic scoring and get there. But the point is, the president continues to focus on raising taxes. And that is not the solution. I don't support that, and I don't think that there will be prominent support.
But weren't you disappointed when the Republican presidential field all said they wouldn't support any kind of package that cut spending by $10 for every $1 of revenue increase? Didn't that disappoint you?
I was not disappointed in the sense that they were all holding firm on saying not raising taxes. But I was disappointed that they didn't focus the debate on the kind of tax reform that will generate greater tax revenue. And that's what I believe is going to be the ultimate solution here.
Who do you expect to be the Republican presidential nominee? Who would be the best candidate for the Republicans?
Another tough one. I have not endorsed anybody yet because I'm waiting to see who I think is the one who can win next November, a year from now. And I haven't made in my own mind a strong conclusion about who that will be. I think that right now we have a number of strong candidates. Obviously, Perry and Romney are the two who are appearing to emerge right now. But I always remind people that this kind of, it's this early in an election cycle, people can move around a lot in that.
Of those two, does one seem more electable as of today?
I would think Romney may be a little more electable, but I don't know. And frankly, I have to say, I don't know Perry very well. But that's just my initial thought about it.
You will have a lot of time to learn about him, I suspect. Senator Mike Crapo, thank you so much for joining us today. And when we come back, we break down the latest battle for the Republican presidential nomination. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back. This week's Republican presidential debate gave many across the country the first real look at Texas Governor Rick Perry, who clashed with several of his rivals. Bloomberg News political reporters Julie Davis and Lisa Lerer join me to talk about that GOP debate and that race. Lisa, it was the first time we saw Rick Perry. Can he take a punch, and can he give a punch?
Well, he did very well in the debate. He came out really strong on the attack against Romney. And what this debate really showed is that this is really narrowing into a two-man race. We're looking at a race between Romney, who represents sort of the more establishment part of the party. People are willing to maybe compromise a bit in order to have a strong candidate against Barack Obama. And Perry, which I think represents more of the Tea Party part of the party, people who don't want to compromise, who want to have a really confrontational tone against the president.
Well, let's zero in on Rick Perry for a second. Again, the question was, could he stand up to heat? He got a lot of heat. He said he felt like a piñata at one point. Tell us how he performed and what he did and what you learned about him.
Well, he certainly wasn't shy on going on the attack. He jumped in right away and was going after Romney for his record of creating jobs in Massachusetts. And part of what we're seeing here and what we saw in that debate is Perry's effort to define himself before Romney or Democrats can define him. Frankly, voters don't really know him. They don't know know much about him. They don't know who he is. So he's trying, what he did in the debate was try to say, listen, I'm a governor. I created jobs. I was preside over this economic miracle in Texas. And what you saw Romney do was try to highlight the more controversial parts of his record, his stance on Social Security, things like that.
Julie, does he face, he being Rick Perry, any danger of sort of being a squeeze, a pincer, if you will? Romney and Huntsman say he's too far right. But from the right, he's being attacked by Bachman and Paul on things like HPV vaccines or supporting Hillary care. That's a potential problem?
Well, absolutely. He is definitely facing a squeeze. I think that's going to be sort of the theme of the contest that we see among Republicans in the next several months here, is you have Romney, as Lisa said, kind of presenting himself as the mainstream alternative, the person who's the more reasoned candidate and who can appeal to a broader swath of voters. But Perry, what we saw him do during the debate is really sort of double down on this image of him as a no-compromise, strong language conservative who's willing to say things that are provocative in order to get things done and in order to change the debate. But that does open him up to the risk that he will be portrayed as an extremist, and that's what Romney tried to do during the debate.
And he walked into it when he kept calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme.
Well, he walked into it, and it was very much by design. At least
Right.
it seemed to be.
It's in his book.
It's in his book, and he said it on the campaign trail. And he obviously walked into that debate ready for the question, and having made the decision that he was not going to walk back that language, and he was going to put himself out there as the person who's willing to say the hard things in order to change the debate.
Well, you couldn't find two candidates more stylistically different than Mitt Romney and Rick Perry. Whatever the ideological differences, stylistically, these guys are just, they have nothing in common.
Absolutely. I mean, you saw in the body language, in the accents. I mean,
Right.
in the two states that they represented as governors, Perry is sort of a swashbuckling Texan. Sort of echoes of George W. Bush, at least in style, with the twang. And when he said that, I kind of feel like the piñata here at the party. I mean, he's sort of that's very much his image. And then Perry. And then Romney is, quite much more sort of reasoned in his language. He speaks properly. He doesn't drop any consonants, and he also is sort of trying to present himself as the CEO candidate. He gave his job speech earlier this week, scooping President Obama on his job speech, and he's trying to present himself as someone who can really come across and create jobs, which in the end is what voters
Did his economic plan do anything this week that he unveiled? Was anything surprising or new in there?
I wouldn't say there was anything really surprising in there. It did point up, the contrast between the two parties of the Republican vision of smaller government and much lower taxes. Right. The one thing that was in there that might have surprised some people was this action that he said he would take against China on the issue of currency manipulation, and Huntsman went after him in the debate on that, saying this is not the time during recession to enter a trade war. So he's definitely trying to push the envelope a bit, but most of the themes that we heard in there were the standard themes we've been hearing from Republicans about how they would create jobs in this economy, a big contrast with the president.
Lisa, the last time we were together, the flavor du jour was Michelle Bachmann. What's happened?
Well, Perry really changed the dynamic of the race for her. They appeal to a lot of the same voters, Tea Party types, social conservatives. So she now really has to make the case about why she's a better candidate than he is. Why should someone who supports the Tea Party vote for her over Rick Perry?
She has to go after Perry to do that, doesn't she?
She probably has to go after Perry, and she didn't do it in last week's debate. Right. She better do it on Monday in the debate in Tampa.
Well, the person that gets
fast.
ignored all the time is Ron Paul, who's not going to
Right.
be the nominee, but he is a presence, isn't he?
He's setting the agenda. You never heard anything about the Fed, really, or very little about the Fed until he came on the scene, and now the Fed is a major issue. Bernanke was a topic in the debate. He came up. Will he get more than 10% in the end? I don't know, but he's definitely driving the conversation and setting the agenda of what issues Republican voters care about and what issues get talked about.
The other one, John Huntsman, showed a little bit more life this time. Is it too little, too late?
He finally did what his supporters have been calling on him to do, go after the other guys.
Right.
My sense is that he's simply not, people are angry right now. They're angry, they don't have jobs, they're frustrated with the economy, and he's a diplomat. And
He's not the
promised
candidate
to run,
of anger.
He's not.
He's the candidate of reason.
And diplomacy.
Right.
He promised to run a civil campaign, and I'm just not sure people want civil right now, especially Republican voters.
Julie, Lisa mentioned these debates coming up. I think there's two over the next 10 days, a prelude to the Bloomberg debate in October. What should we look for in these next couple of debates?
I think we need to look for, how this Perry-Romney dynamic evolves, whether Romney actually goes on the offensive more to try to halt his slide from the front-runner status, at least in public polls. That's what we're seeing. Also, how Perry holds up under the pressure. I mean, he's clearly the one who's being attacked by his rivals the most. He's clearly the one who pundits and journalists have the most questions about because he's been on the scene for less time. And also whether Bachmann and Huntsman can really stay in this thing, and what happens with Ron Paul.
Ken Michelle wound Rick Perry. Okay, hey, thank both of you. Lots of weeks ahead. And when we come back, how much of his proposed $447 billion jobs plan will President Obama get? The last word right after this break. Welcome back. We'll go to Margaret, Carlson, and Cato Byrne in just a minute. But first, we bring in Bloomberg News White House reporter Julianna Goldman. Joint session of Congress the other night. Julianna, will the president get what he's asking for in a jobs program?
You know, I don't think the White House is under any illusions. They don't think that the American Jobs Act, as the president laid out, is going to get through Congress as it stands. But that's why out of the $447 billion that the president put forth, $250 billion of that, over half, was in the form of tax cuts to middle class and small businesses. And that's what the White House thinks they have the best chance of getting through Congress.
Julianna, why that venue? That usually is reserved for State of the Union or post 9/11 or after the Kennedy assassination. That really elevates it a lot. Why couldn't they have given a speech in some other majestic setting, but not a joint session?
Well, what they wanted, they really wanted to draw attention to the urgency. You heard the president say that Congress needs to come together to address what he called an ongoing national crisis. So they wanted to elevate this, and they also wanted to be able to reach out to as many audiences as possible, including Congress, putting pressure on members of Congress to come together to pass some sort of jobs program, also trying to get as many Americans to tune in, because now the president goes on to the next challenge, which is selling this to the American people to continue to put pressure on Congress.
Yeah, I'll bet you that audience wasn't very big comparatively when we find out. But okay, selling it. This president has a habit of a big speech and not much of a follow-through. The same pattern this time?
Well, the White House is banking on that not being the case. The president, the day after that speech, he went to Richmond, Virginia, home to Eric Cantor, and then next week he's going to be going to Ohio, home of John Boehner. So the president is going to be doing this, but the challenge that he has is that on September 19th, he's going to be announcing how to pay for this and the deficit reduction proposals for that super committee. And so the challenge for the president is to keep this singular focus on jobs. And he gives these speeches, and then he goes on to the next fire, the next crisis, and really it needs to just be all about jobs.
Even more than a legislative proposal, this really was a political salvo, one of the opening shots for 2012, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was drawing the battle lines for the 2012 campaign, putting Republicans on notice, framing it as two different visions of government involvement and how to best rescue this economy. But the president can give as many speeches as he wants. One of the things they wanted to do here was to try and boost confidence for consumers and the business side. But unless that unemployment rate goes down, unless come election day and heading into election day, there is substantial progress on the economy, the president is going to be in deep trouble for that 2012 election.
All right, Julianna Goldman, thank you. Let me turn to Kate and Margaret now. Kate, how much of that jobs package is he going to get and what?
Al, not a lot. There were two minor problems with the speech in that respect. Its tone and its substance.
Other than that, you were fine.
It was a very polarizing speech. That speech wasn't delivered in a cooperative spirit looking for bipartisan agreement. This administration has had a orgy of regulations, lots of new regulations, spending more regulation, bureaucrats. If you're a critic of that with respect to economic growth, you want children exposed to mercury, and the substance of it, clearly the White House now wants to be able to blame House Republicans or Capitol Hill Republicans for standing in the way of his fabulous job creation. That'll only work, though, if the public sees these as winning ideas that are being blocked. And House Republicans don't see it that way. They think they're being asked to spend money we don't have on jobs we're not going to get.
Margaret, do you agree?
I totally disagree. I'm so surprised at Kate. You're such a practical person. Looking for bipartisan agreement has gotten the president nowhere. So why would he keep doing that? And we've criticized him for giving away so much. Yes, I do. I think he had to expose the country to how many parts of this program Republicans used to agree with, to show that now they're playing politics and it is defeat Obama at any cost.
Okay, speaking of the upper hand, the Austin-Boston shootout, Perry versus Romney on Ponzi, in Social Security Ponzi scheme. In a Republican primary, who has the upper hand?
Well, I'd say Romney had a good comeback. He said, "I want to secure it, not kill it." Unless our politics has completely changed, and Social Security is on the table to kill, you're watching Rick Perry commit political suicide. It made no sense to him because the Florida primary is going to be so important this time. Romney may win New Hampshire. He could win South Carolina. They go into Florida. Do you want to go into Florida saying that you want to end this Ponzi scheme of Social Security?
I don't. No, I don't, Al. I think both Mitt Romney and Rick Perry share an acknowledgement and recognition that Social Security Administration over the long term is not sustainable. Polls show the public recognizes that too. They share a problem, though. Rick Perry, of course, expressed himself more colorfully than Mitt Romney does about the problems of Social Security. But the problem they share is neither one has outlined a plan to put Social Security back on a more stable fiscal footing. And that's a challenge for both, and I predict we will see both do that. Nobody is going to be running to kill Social Security.
Well, I'm glad you're both not going to Florida because I want to have you right here. Thank you very much, Cato Byrne and Margaret Carlson. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
This is Political Capital from Bloomberg Television.